Hey folks, Surley here. For today's video, I'll be demonstrating how I use my Surley's paper cartridge kit to make 44 caliber paper cartridges for percussion revolvers like this one. Stick around. Hey folks, Surley here. For my first video, I'm going to demonstrate how I use my paper cartridge system to make 44 caliber paper cartridges for percussion revolvers. So, we'll go ahead and open up my kit, which contains our forming die and dowel. We've got a funnel for pouring our powder in our cartridges, and we've got a couple of templates here. Those templates are used as a tracing tool and a cutting tool, so when you make your cartridge envelopes, you can just trace them out of the paper of your choice. For this demo, I'm just using simple wrapping paper, which is kind of easy to come by and it burns fairly well. And the second template is for your bottom of your cartridge. So same deal, you can just trace them onto the paper and cut them out as I've done here. And I've made a few of these already pre-cut, so we can just demonstrate the process of rolling these guys. Okay, so we'll get the case up out of the way here. And later we'll put our cartridges in our cartridge box when we're finished, so we have a decent place for them. So some other materials you're going to need, just a glue stick, and I've got some lead ball here, so I'm going to do round ball cartridges. And then I have this powder flask that I'm just going to pour 30 grain charges out of. Okay, so first what we'll do is we'll take out our dowel. If we look closely, you should be able to see 3 little hash marks on the dowel. And those hash marks, as I'll show you in a little bit, will give you a cutting guide for your cartridges. So what these are, will give you a guide to cut your paper to length once you've measured your powder, whether that be a 30 grain charge, 40 grain charge, or 50 grain charge if you're doing something like a Walker or Dragoon size pistol. Well, first things first, we'll take our dowel, our paper, and what I generally do is I take the long edge of the paper, which matches to the long edge of the template here, and I put it towards the top of the dowel and try to line up the bottom of your envelope with the bottom of your dowel, and then we'll roll it over. And then my next step is I'll just hold it like this. And you can see my fingers are kind of underneath of this kind of edge here. And I'll take my glue stick and I'll just apply the glue to that edge, just a light amount. You don't really need a whole lot to hold this stuff together. Okay, and then while I kind of hold this tight, I'll try to wrap it as tightly as possible around the dowel as I can, keeping everything kind of lined up. And it's as simple as that. So that should be well glued, and we'll give this a little twist to make sure it's unstuck from our dowel, because sometimes they'll get a little sticky and stay stuck to your dowel. Next, we'll just take our forming die, and the top part is of course the top of the numbers, and there's a little taper to the top so you can differentiate it from the bottom even more. I'll set the dowel down. I'll take my bottom piece, and the bottom piece I'll just kind of wipe it around in the glue and pick up some of that glue on the bottom. And it's a little tricky. So we've got a little, whoops, got a little thin layer of glue here on our square. And I'll try to center that as much as I can over the hole in the die. Now we'll take our dowel, and we'll gently push it in, and it'll come to a stop at some point, and you don't really want to force it past the point where it stops. Okay, next we'll kind of give it a gentle twist and pull it out gently, and you can see that our bottom has been pressed onto the envelope around all sides, so it basically follows the form of the dowel. And if you get an edge that comes up like this, you can just apply a little more glue, stick it back down, and form it a little more nicely. And if you need more glue, you can just tack it on there and kind of gently wipe it around with your fingers in kind of an upward motion. Okay. Now we'll take our envelope off. It's getting sticky. My fingers are getting sticky. So you can see this is a little bit of a tedious process. Okay, we've gotten it freed from our dowel. Now what I like to do is put it back inside of our die once we've gotten it freed from the dowel, and just sort of place it right inside there. That gives us a place to kind of hold our cartridge while we fill it with powder. And for our next step, before we fill this with powder, you tend to want to let your glue dry just a little bit. That way it's not too soft and delicate when you're actually going to pour the powder, because then you don't want things to spill everywhere. So my next step, what I'll do is your dowel kind of has two purposes here, or rather your funnel. The stem of your funnel can be just placed into the bottom of your die like this, and you can see how it sort of pushes the cartridge up. And that'll let us charge it a little bit more easily in a minute. So for now, I'll push it down, and I'll use my funnel as its kind of primary intention. Place it down in there. I'll take my flask, go ahead and charge it. We've got a nice 30 grain charge here, and I'll pour it in the funnel. It's alright if it stops, because once we lift the funnel out, the powder should fall right down. You can give it a little tap with your finger and knock any extra powder down into the cartridge. So now at this point, we'll take our funnel, set the die on top of it, and you can see it pushes the cartridge up at this point a little bit out of the die. Another bit of thing you might need is a pair of scissors. Here I've got a little pair of kid scissors. Makes life a little easier with things like this sometimes. Now, if you've done this tightly enough, you should see where the grooves on your dowel have kind of imprinted into the paper. It's not really visible on camera, but it is there. So with that, we'll go ahead and lift our cartridge out. And what you generally want is your cut line should be about 1/4 of an inch above the top of your powder charge. So if we're here on the powder charge, the cut line should be about 1/4 of an inch high, and it should be kind of marked off thanks to your dowel. So we'll go ahead and cut now. And of course you could trim this before you pour your powder charge, but I find it a little easier to do it afterwards, because then your cartridge doesn't want to flatten out on you when you go to cut it. So now that our cartridge is shorter, this is where our funnel in the bottom really comes in handy. And you can see there, it's now resting on top of our funnel stem. And that's a fairly stable platform, because that funnel is just about as wide as the bottom of the die here. Okay, next. This is the kind of the fun part to me, is I'll just take a round ball and I'll take my glue stick. I'll take my round ball and I'll just roll it around a bit in the glue stick and get it nice and sticky and covered in glue. Because the next step is to just kind of place it on top of here. So I like to just gently place it, and of course this being a cast ball, there's a sprue on it, so you want to try to get the sprue up. So we will just drop him in there gently. and push down a little bit. Okay, and that's really it. That's almost your final step. So we've got a nice tight paper cartridge with a round ball, and I will just take my fingers and kind of slide them along the paper edge here upward against the ball. This way we make sure we have a nice good bond between the glue and the paper. Okay, and that's a nearly complete paper cartridge. And now we just do that 5 more times, and we have us 6 cartridges to go into our cartridge box. Now, the next step I'll show you in a minute is how to lubricate these. So I'm out at my reloading bench now, and here I've got a little hot plate, and on top of that I've got some black powder lube here. Now I make this black powder lube, it's really simple, out of about half beeswax and half olive oil, but you can use different materials too, like this lamb tallow for example. But I just use olive oil as it's very simple to measure out, and you can do let's say an ounce of beeswax and an ounce of olive oil. Just as long as you have a half and half mix. This makes a real stiff grease that won't run in the heat, but it'll stick to your cartridges really well. You can alter the mixture some to make a softer grease, like by adding more olive oil or more like lamb tallow, for example. So when you heat that up, that'll look kind of more like this, and it's pretty easy to melt down, just medium heat. I use a hot plate out here on the reloading bench for this, just to keep everything kind of separated from my kitchen. So here I've got the paper cartridges that we've made so far. I'll go ahead and dump them out. Okay, and as you can see, I've made our 3 round balls. And I've also got a set of conicals for this set that I've made. And these are the Johnson & Dow conicals from Air Is Gone bullet molds. And it's the same process either way. You can take your round ball, and you're just going to invert the cartridge and dip it in quickly and pull it out. You don't really need to hold the cartridge in to the lube for a very long time at all. All you really need is a little coating, and it will, that is the lube, will cool very quickly. So I'll show that to you now. So we'll take our cartridge, we'll just dip it into our lube, and that's really all we need to do. That's all the time that it takes. And if you just take it and roll it around so your bead of grease allows it to dry for a little bit. And that's it. It's very easy to do. And we'll just repeat for the next 6 cartridges. And I'll go ahead, now that that's cooled, place it in my cartridge box. I'll put that there so we can see it. This time I'll take a conical, same exact thing. Just dip it in up to the paper, pull it out, roll the bead around, and you can see it's dried already, or cooled already rather, and you get a nice clean even coat on that bullet. And we can drop her into the cartridge box. Okay, perfect. Now I'll just do the rest. While I do this, it's worth noting that if you're like me and you're into black powder quite a bit now, you can take your bullets that you're going to load into metallic cartridges. You can do the same process. Before you load them, you can dip them the other way around. That is, lube groove down or base down. You can coat your bullet and the grease grooves with your black powder grease before you load them into your cartridges. And it'll work just the same as with cap and ball. So here's another round ball. Just dip it in. Roll it a little bit. We'll just let that dry a little bit. I keep saying dry, but I mean cool. And that's it. It's not even really hot to the touch. And a little jar of lube like this will last you quite a long time. Here I'm just using old cans, but you can use any kind of metallic container that you want. Anything that you can heat back up and melt back down on a stove or a hot plate. And there we have it. It's that easy and that quick. Now we have a complete set of 6 ready to go. Now here we have 6 completed round ball paper cartridges, and you can see they've all been lubricated. And now we can take our cartridge box, which just pushes out of either side here, and we can just drop them in. And we've got enough space here in our box in case we want to load conicals or a little bit taller of a cartridge, say a 40 grain cartridge. And they all sit nicely in there. And we'll take our sleeve and just put it back on where it came from. It's as simple as that. So now we've got a half dozen cartridges ready to go for the range.